This is interesting. Government's organised a national dialogue on coalitions. It starts tomorrow at the University of the Western Cape. And of course, we've seen in particular since the 2021 municipal elections that hung councils often lead to ugly power struggles. And if the surveys on next year's national and provincial elections are anything to go by, coalitions could loom even larger in politics at a provincial, possibly even a national level. Let's find out more about tomorrow's gathering, and I'm joined now by Mbulelo Tshangana, Director General in the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Good evening, Mr. Tshangana. Thank you so much for joining us. I think it's a crucial meeting to have, honestly, because we've seen such a lot of mess and chaos at local level. Something has to change. First of all, have you included all political parties in tomorrow's gathering?
Good evening to you, Sally, and good evening to your listeners. Yes, we have invited all political parties. This has generated a lot of interest amongst a lot of political parties. So we will have a significant number of political parties tomorrow.
That's good news, because I think you need everyone around the table to sort this particular problem out. How are you planning to tackle the issue? I mean, what are you thinking are the best strategies to get everyone to agree on how to make sure we don't have ongoing chaos?
First of all, Sally, I think let's admit that the hung councils or coalition government is not necessarily a problem. This is a constitutional dispensation that we created for the country. One could say, is democracy maturing. I guess the main issue is how best do we regulate and manage the hung councils or coalition governments. I think the key issue is about the management, because you have coalition governments in Europe, or you have coalition governments in Latin America, you have coalition governments in mature democracies. So it's not necessarily a problem. I think the real issue is how best do we manage them.
Yeah, that is the question. You're right. Do you think there's something wrong with our laws, or is there something wrong with our politicians, that they play these games that lead to, budgets not being passed, puppet mayors being installed and then de-installed? Is it the politicians or is it the laws?
Well, one could say it's a bit of both. I remember in politics is also a numbers game. I once said to a colleague of mine that if you don't like maths, please stay away from politics. Because if you look at what's happening during elections and post-elections, we spend a lot of time, on the numbers, looking at proportional representation. We look at how coalition governments are formed. At the end of the day, it's about the citizens, and it's about service delivery. I think we do need to regulate them. I think we need to come up with a credible framework on how we can manage hung councils. And the bigger part of the debate tomorrow is about managing coalition governments, and it's about looking at the Municipal Structures Act and ask ourselves if we shouldn't amend certain aspects of the Structures Act, Section 12 notices or establishment notices, Section 43, 45, and all the sections in the Structures Act that governs the running of the council. So I think there are certain aspects of the Structures Act that need to be amended. Remember, we've gone past 25 years in this space. I think the timing is perfect for us to debate the Structures Act, to debate certain aspects of the Systems Act, because these are the pieces of legislation that regulates the running of local government.
Would any of those pieces of legislation realistically, though, be changed before next year's general election?
Well, next year's elections are about national and provincial governments. Local government elections are in...
That's right. So are these, sorry to jump in, just for a point of clarity, is this meeting just about local coalitions?
Well, it will cover mainly coalitions at local government level, because you will agree with me that there is a little bit of stability at provincial and national government. But the main challenge at this stage is around hung councils in local government. As you know, in 2000, we had about plus minus 30, hung councils in this country. And in 2021, we have about 82 hung councils. That number is statistically significant. So we have to find a framework to manage this significant number of hung councils.
So when we're talking about a framework, I mean, that sounds like it might help, but there are so many challenges at local level in particular. Our municipalities, many of them are at the point of bankruptcy. So there's issues around funds, cash flow, infrastructure problems, workers wanting more money. It's very, very easy to create more instability in a hung council. What are the big lessons that have been learned so far about running coalition governments, things that we really need to take on board, or that our politicians perhaps need to take on board?
Sally, I think the rules of engagement must be very clear up front. I think we need to specify the rules of engagement. And those rules of engagement must not be very much inward looking. I mean, one of the things that we are introducing is coalition agreements. And those coalition agreements must be made public. And the coalition agreements, this is what we are proposing to be introduced, must be signed by all the parties in the coalition. And they must agree that once they have signed that coalition agreements, we will hold them accountable to what is in the coalition agreement.
I think those
and the citizens.
And I mean, you're bringing in the citizens, which of course is true because it's the citizens who suffer. But I think you're speaking and you're touching on an issue of trust. And trust is, you've got to build trust between your coalition partners, but you've also got to build trust within your own party. I mean, we've seen people voting against the party directive to give power to another political party. How do you go about building the sort of trust that is needed to get parties and people within those parties effectively working together for the good of the citizen?
Well, that's why we need to conduct with each other. The coalition agreement will make it possible for the parties to contract with each other. It will make it possible for the citizens to know what is in that contract. It will also make it possible that if the contract is violated, then consequence management must be implemented. So we do need the rules of the game to be known by everyone, including the citizens of the municipality, so that we don't just change things willy-nilly. One of the things that is being proposed, and it will be debated tomorrow, is that there should be no vote of confidence, at least for 2 years, in the council. Whether that is likely to pass or not, we're putting all of these things on the table to be debated tomorrow, and they will continue to debate them. But we think that you need to give the council a little bit of stability, at least for 2 years, for that council to function before you start making all these significant changes about vote of no confidence to the council. Whether that will work or not, that's a different matter. So there are instruments that we can use to build that trust. There are instruments that we can use to create stability in the council. In other countries, they also talk about pushing up the threshold. For instance, if you look at the number of political parties in Ethiopia, you have 19 now. But if you were to push up the threshold, you will have 4. Just to push it above 1%, you will have 4. In a number of countries around the world, they use this threshold. But we'll debate them tomorrow. I don't want to preempt what's going to be discussed tomorrow, but I'm giving you a flavor of some of the things that will come out in that meeting tomorrow.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I think it's such a crucial conversation to be having. I wish you luck with all the political parties. Hopefully there's no votes of no confidence and walkouts during your 2-day discussion, that you can actually reach agreements about how to go forward for the best of the citizens of this country. Thank you so much for your time, much appreciated. That is Mbulelo Tshangana. He's Director General in the Department of Co-operative Governance and Traditional Affairs. They've got a 2-day meeting involving all political parties talking about getting coalition governments right.